WonderBirds are supported by dogfriendly.co.uk, improving the lives of dogs and their owners.
Afternoon, all.
Hi.
How is everybody? What's the news from the weekend?
Welcome back. Welcome back, Hills. Hills is here.
Hillary, what are you saying?
Thank you so much for asking me back, girls. My big news is, have you guys ever done this? Have you ever gone intentionally to go somewhere to do one thing and end up doing something entirely different?
What have you done?
Okay, so
what have you done?
I went to have a cappuccino at the top of a store in Guildford, and I had the cappuccino, and then I bought a sofa and an armchair.
Sorry, you went in for a coffee and you came out with a sofa and an armchair?
Yeah.
Oh no, but I've done something much better than that.
What?
No.
I once went out to buy some petrol and came back with a new car.
Oh, for F's sake.
Oh my goodness. I can top that.
You can top that.
No.
I went on holiday and bought an island. It was Tracy Island in a junk shop. Does that count?
Darlings, can I just tell you, I went to a supermarket and came out with food. Thank you.
Oh, you're weird.
Yeah, you're weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who does
Not
that?
You're weird.
Well, me apparently.
Yeah.
A car, an island, and a sofa and an armchair.
Well, the thing is, my ex-husband David will clarify that. He was so stunned. He said, "Where is the car?" I said, "I changed it."
That's fantastic.
He gone for about an hour and a half as well. It's just
Moving on. Moving on.
Oh.
This is insane. You are all insane.
Now, moving on. That's very interesting news actually today. In the papers I was reading, well, actually on the Mail Online, and I do read that. I know some people don't, but I do. About the medical detection dogs giving a 94% positive COVID test. You heard it here, folks.
Yes.
Because we was talking about that. We were talking about that over a year ago on this show.
Yes.
About how medical detection dogs could sniff out COVID. And
Yes.
I'm very proud that we put it out there then, didn't we, girls?
Well, I remember you saying that to me, Debbie, and saying you actually, because you work with the detective dogs, medical detective dogs, and you said to me, this would be one way to get them back into theatres, etc. I remember you saying that to me at the time.
We talked about it on the show. Yeah.
And it could have worked. It could have worked then. It could still work now. I mean, you've got sniffer dogs going up and down, don't you? Sniffing for explosives.
Yeah.
You could just have people up and down sniffing at the theatre, so then you can have a full house.
They're so clever, aren't they? That's a wonderful idea. Also, on that sort of tangent is I got onto the Queen Mary to work to do the transatlantic crossing, and I just was walking along the main drag along the bottom of the ship, on the bottom of the ship. I don't mean on the bottom where the barnacles are. I mean just below that. And
how much have you been drinking today, darling? How much have you had to drink today?
Hold on, Harriet. No,
thank you.
Still gin.
Okay.
It was a Labrador, and I was so shocked to see a dog on the ship. Now, inside the ship, they have kennels upstairs where you can take your pets across to America and back. But to be allowed on the ship, and it was a medical dog, so the dog knew when the owner needed medical response, and I just thought, dogs are incredible. They know stuff, don't they?
They really are.
Medical detection dogs are really fantastic because they train them in lots of different ways. First of all, they can train them. They can sniff out cancer. They can sniff out lots of different things, but they also train them to work with people with epilepsy and to work with people with diabetes. So they're diabetic dogs. They're all sorts of different, and they can be any size. They can be little ones. They can be big ones. It's just all about the schnoz.
Oh, right.
And a lot of them are failed guide dogs. And so you see a guide dog. Now this is interesting. I'm sure everybody knows this, but I didn't know it, which is ridiculous because it would just make sense. Guide dogs have to be purely visual, whereas medical detection dogs have to be nose-led. So if you're a very good guide dog, you do not really take much notice of your nose. But if you're a failed guide dog, it means you're going, what's that? What's that? You can't be doing that. So they fail them because they follow their nose as opposed to the sight.
I think humans do that. Certainly, if I smell some brownies, I'm off. I don't know about anybody else.
Or roast dinner.
A banana away, or whatever. Who's coming in today, darling?
Well, we have a very interesting and inspiring guest. I thought we needed someone like this. His name is Jamie Hull. He's written a book called Life on a Thread, and he has been through the most incredible life-changing experience, and he has come to the WonderBird show to top that, I think. But we are so pleased to welcome Jamie Hull.
Hi.
Jamie.
Hi, good afternoon.
Welcome to our nest, darling. Brace, brace, brace. That's all I've got to say.
So Jamie, you've written this book called Life on a Thread. Can you tell our viewers why you were inspired to write this book and what exactly has happened to you? Because it's so inspiring.
So the bottom line for me regarding writing the book was that I was doing a lot of speaking and engagements as an ambassador for the charity Help for Heroes. And this goes back probably till about 2013. I had a big operation down the midline here, which is what surgeons call a laparotomy. So they go in, they investigate, they sometimes have to do a bit of repair. And it was just part of the course of my long and arduous recovery. And then I wound up in the recovery centre down at Tedworth House in Tidworth in Wiltshire. And so I had an idea to go out and be in my recovery, this was to be a spokesperson for the charity and sort of share my story with others in the hope that it would, drum up hopefully some continued popular support for the charity, raise some awareness and perhaps do a bit of fundraising and so on and so forth. So we could support, the ongoing cause for the charity. And in doing so, long story short, I basically became an ambassador. And then talking about, my journey and the story over the forthcoming years, I guess I started to receive a lot of encouragement. And, I considered the book, but I admittedly, I more or less sat on the fence for nigh on a decade before I actually got round to doing it. And
Can you tell our viewers what exactly happened to you, Jamie?
of course. So I was piloting an aircraft in US airspace. I was a serviceman at the time, but for the record, I was not on a duty. So it wasn't Her Majesty's duty. And I was flying off my own, on my own agenda, if you will, in the US. And I'd chosen to go to the US specifically because it was an opportunity for me to perhaps get the flying training completed within a relatively short time frame. And so I had about a 6-week window before I was due to go off on an operational deployment at the time. And this was back in the summer of 2007. And so there I was out in Florida, and I was about a month into the course. And on this one particular day, 19th of August 2007, I had an engine fire.
What were you flying, Jamie?
A small little light aircraft, so single engine piston. Just imagine a small 2-seater cockpit, small fiberglass thing with a single prop on the front. And and on this one day, so August 2007, my engine flared. It flared up at altitude. So I was about 1,000 feet above ground, I could determine that from the instrument panel in front. And it flared up. And then no sooner as I made my sort of final turn into wind to sort of descend down towards the active runway, that was my sort of final objective for landing. And as I turned for that final turn, it breached the cockpit internally. So I looked down and my feet operating the rudder pedals, sort of left and right. The flames breached and they started to lap around my feet and ankles. And so I had to think on my feet. And I'm descending towards the active runway down below. And as I'm descending, I'm watching that altimeter spin down through sort of 900 feet, 800 feet, 700 feet. And I will admit there was an initial fluster and a bit of panic going on. I was a solo sort of qualified pilot to do what I was doing. But I wasn't a hugely experienced pilot. I only had a sort of a limited sort of logbook time under my belt, about 40 hours. And so there was an initial panic. But as I probably got to about, say, 500 feet on the altimeter, so I'm about half the height now from where the fire had breached, and I've descended to about half the height, approximately 500. And so the fire now is about belly height, inside the chamber of the cockpit. And I really, it's fair to say that I had a bit of a light bulb moment. And I basically knew in my mind, you know, in the sort of grey matter there, what I had to do to get out of that burning cockpit quicker. And in order to avoid the, you know, too much exposure to the flames for a longer period. So I actually veered away gently to my left. I just pulled the stick gently to my left. I basically pulled back on the throttle completely to sort of, you know, to idle. And then I followed the emergency protocol. Now it sounds complex, but it was relatively simple because I'd been taught it, and it was a drill that the instructors had drilled into me in the US over and over again. So I systematically turned off the ignition key, the red switches, alpha and bravo, off, the master switch, lights, strobes, everything off. In the center column, sort of fuel pump off, rotate the fuel selector valve off. And then I'm still descending, remember, I'm still gliding in. I then sort of pull back on the stick and forwards and back, just to scrub off as much airspeed as I possibly could safely, but being conscious that I didn't want to risk taking too much speed off and the stall potentially. So I was careful to glide in with some speed, but scrub as much forward momentum as I could by sort of gently sort of flaring and then sort of putting forward again the nose. And I'm gliding in, and then about 200 feet thereabouts, I basically ripped off the headset over my head, threw it in the opposite footwell, because at that stage the comms with the tower below, in my opinion, was futile. I was too busy with what was going on, too low level. And I leaned across and I very carefully sort of unbuckled my 3-point harness, so over each shoulder and around the waist, unbuckled that. I leaned over, opened the left-hand canopy door, had to sort of elbow that and punch it, strike it with the heel of my hand. The door popped up, probably 100 feet above ground. And then this kind of wind, this increased wind from outside sort of entered the cockpit. Now that wasn't great because it added sort of fuel to the fire.
Of course.
As you would expect. So the fire then began to rage in the cockpit, and it was kind of, the flames were literally up around my face and neck as the wind bore in. And I was very low level, sort of 50 feet and below. And in those last moments, I can actually recall sort of left hand on the control stick, right hand on the throttle position, but that was off. And I'm literally sort of breathing through the corner of my mouth and sort of one eye shut in a vain bid, if you will, to protect my eyesight from the lapping flames, and also to protect my airway from the flame ingress. So it was an extremely, it was a moment of total duress, and I, you know, kind of then started judging it purely by eye, and I'm running in looking for sort of hazard, looking for obstacles. And I'm heading for a stretch of grass where I knew that there'd been recent torrential rainfall and potentially soft ground. And then, you know, sort of below 50 feet, sort of judging it. And when I got to about 20 feet, and remember the door is open now, that wind coming in, I'm gliding in as gently as I could, but it was kind of, my mind was racing. About 20 feet, I managed to clamber onto my left seat, which I was sat in. So get up onto that, climb through the open door aperture onto the left wing, and approximately 15 or 15 feet, I then took a giant leap, sort of good old fashioned para sort of exit style, off of the back of the trailing edge of the left wing, snapped my hands together in sort of prayer position above my head, and my feet and knees together in the air. And I jumped. I made that jump sort of looking at the horizon. And then I landed sort of boom in the long grass and the dirt, if you will. And then I sort of thrust forwards with the momentum. I sort of went forwards and down, and I basically popped a collarbone. I had a secondary impact, bilateral nasal fracture, supraorbital eye socket fractures bilaterally, both sides. and multiple soft tissue lacerations from the sharp Florida grass. And yeah, it was absolutely horrendous. So I landed like a sack of spuds. But you know, my right shoulder, incidentally, was still on fire, and I had to pat that out aggressively. And my right of scalp was still on fire. As you can see, that right side sort of dominant burn, still very much a Roman candle, and I had to aggressively pat the scalp out as well as the shoulder.
Yeah.
I physically just caught a glimpse of the aircraft still airborne in the distance.
Wow.
She was nose heavy. She was left wing down, and the prop was about 6 feet above the ground. And I physically sort of watched it whilst laying in the fetal position through my sort of hands, through the slats of my fingers. And I physically watched her pile in, sort of the crumpling, crashing noise. And then there was a subsequent pause and a sort of a delay, maybe 8, possibly 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden, boom. I was just outside of the fire radius of the explosion, however, not outside the shockwave. So I took the full brunt of the shockwave. It came through me and sort of reverberated itself back again. And then I was desperately winded. I couldn't breathe. I was trying to then instinctively just turn and crawl away to make more distance between myself and the burning wreckage, which was probably only about 70 feet away. So perhaps the length of a couple of London buses. And I got perhaps 15 feet or so in the long grass. Meanwhile, that long razor grass in tropical Florida basically tore my face to shreds, my elbows and my knees, where I'm desperately trying to sort of leopard crawl away in the grass to make distance. And then I perhaps got, you know, that added distance, but I was utterly spent and I had nothing left. And so I then got on my knees to sort of survey the wreckage, and I'm sort of trying to protect my face and from the heat in the inferno, which has died down, but it was still ferociously burning in the distance. And that's when I knew it was like the dawn of realization of exactly, you know, the gravitas of what had just happened, what had just occurred. And I knew it was absolutely, you know, a man on a knife edge, and I had minutes to spare. Like,
how long was it? How long was it till people got to you?
So I would estimate that somehow I managed to hold on, you know, maybe 15 minutes. During that time, I took my shoes and socks off because I didn't think I was going to obviously survive. And just my rationale was that I obviously didn't need shoes and socks for where I was headed next.
Yeah.
And it's one journey I didn't need those for. And I was just, you know, can imagine in a desperate state of mind, my mental state was deteriorating rapidly. And also my eyesight. So my eyesight had reacted to the burns that I'd recently sustained. So the cornea of both my eyes was actually badly scarred as well.
Jamie, I have to ask you, I'm always fascinated by the power of the mind and how people can overcome so many things. And you're walking proof of that. Did you, in that moment, did you make like a decision to, I'm going to survive? You obviously made all the right decisions. And do you think that's possible for people? You inspire people in that way. And how powerful is that? Because I always think it's, you know, remarkable when I hear stories like yours.
Well, simply put, I mean, number one, as I described, I simply followed an emergency protocol, which was a drill that I'd been taught. So I was very much a logical sort of minded individual and very sort of pragmatic in my approach to life. And I guess having been a former serviceman, a soldier, and also, you know, back in the day, don't hold it against me, but I was also a serving police officer as well with the Thames Valley. So, you know, I guess over the years I'd had a lot of sort of government sort of training, and a lot of that is quite regimented. You know, you just follow protocol and procedure, and you learn to sort of have to think on your feet sometimes and make quite split second, quite sort of quick.
So was that an instinct to survive? That protocol that you described, that was your light bulb moment to survive when you, after the accident?
It's fair to say it was an instinct to survive, yes, but in reality, in that moment, you know, it was, you know, it was the ultimate kind of duress and moment of high stress to be under. You know, there I was, essentially trapped in a tiny 2-seater cockpit, while still airborne, and the fire had sort of breached, and it was starting to build, and I just had to think on my feet, and I just came up with an exit plan, as simple as that. It was, you know, how do I possibly get myself out of this situation quicker?
Dee, can I ask, Dee, did you mean post, you mean in recovery? Where was his impetus to survive when he was recovering?
No, I meant the sort of inspiration for other people. Do you feel that the mind is that powerful that people can make, you know, to really or heal themselves, or you know, when the chips are down, for most people, a lot of people just sink or think they have to sink. But I think what you're saying is that the mind is so powerful that, you know, you can use anything as almost like a platform, which is what you did. That,
Well, I think
you know,
it was instinct, wasn't it, Jamie? I think you went back to your instinct of survival, isn't it?
Yes.
Exactly that. It was raw and determined instinct. So it was that you know, you've heard of that fight or flight response. For me, you know, I was in the fight of my life in that singular moment.
Yes.
It also became that undoubted sort of flight response. You know, I was under extreme duress, adrenaline was kind of most heightened, and I'm trying to think on my feet. I came up with an exit plan, and I was thankfully sort of bold enough and courageous enough to follow through on that and get out of that burning cockpit. And fortunately,
your time in hospital, Jamie, in America was roughly, was it 6 months, and then a further 18 months of intensive care in England, is that right?
Yeah, correct. So I was airlifted from the scene, so paramedics on an ambulance probably within 15 minutes. I had a helicopter that dropped in probably 5 minutes later. So the ambulance transferred me quickly to a waiting helicopter, you know, rotor blade spinning.
Wow.
I remember I couldn't see because of the reaction to my eyesight, but I remember, you know, the doors opening. I got sort of slid into the back of the helicopter. It was an air ambulance, and I'm talking to a doctor, and they're transferring me about 20-25 minutes through Orlando airspace. And it was a desperate moment for me. I mean, I was hanging on by a thread with everything that I had.
Hence the name of your book, of course.
Yeah, correct. So originally the manuscript, I wanted to call it Mouse on a Thread, because that was how I describe how I felt. I felt like a mouse on a thread. In other words, at any moment, I was so vulnerable and the thread was going to snap, and that would be me sort of tumbling into oblivion, as it were. But the publishers, I think it's fair to say, thought it sounded like a bit of either a crime caper or a children's genre.
Disney, yeah.
So in the end, I sort of tweaked it to what it is, life on a thread.
Can I ask you, what brings you pleasure today? What are your hobbies today? I know you do all these motivational speaking, but what about you? What do you do? And, you know, what brings you pleasure? Where do you go? What are your pastimes?
You know, I'm actually a pretty simple soul at heart, I would suggest. So I like, you know, the kind of everyday simple pleasures of just getting out for a walk. I try to do that every day, you know, get some fresh air, get a little bit of sunshine, you know, if we're blessed with the sunshine.
If we get any, yeah.
British summer being what it is right now. So I love to walk or hiking. I love also swimming. I try to get to the swimming pool as often as I can, maybe 3 or 4 times a week realistically. And I try to push maybe a kilometre in the pool, you know, just gentle laps back and forward.
You're amazing. Your idea of a walk, Jamie, is going up Kilimanjaro. Mine's going to Costa and back. I mean, you're incredible.
I want to know what else you do for sort of socially, for fun, for what are your sort of passions in life? Do you like art? Do you like movies? Do you like, you know, what else do you like?
Yeah, I love the movies, and I mean, cinemas have been down obviously because of the pandemic for a little while. But I like to get to the movies, and I like to read. You know, I like to read a good sort of, you know, action sort of non-fiction or sorry, fiction or something like that, just to kind of keep me kind of inspired. But I like to keep up with current affairs. You know, read the newspapers. You know, grab the Evening Standard and go through there and kind of see what's happening in the world. BBC News, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I love
are an
scuba diving. Scuba diving is my number one.
What?
Ah,
Oh my
right.
gosh, how amazing. Where do you go to scuba dive?
So I've been pretty blessed. I'm actually very sort of senior in the diving world as a PADI instructor, PADI course director. And I've been around the world, actually. I've been to some, well, you know, unlimited sort of number of countries, really. I forget.
Yeah.
But one of my favourite dives was in the Philippines many moons ago,
Nice.
in the South China Sea. Crystal clear visibility and
Beautiful.
fantastic marine life, and you know, kind of large.
And the
lake.
quiet, I would imagine the quiet and just the beauty, as you say, just gives one peace of mind. Will you come back and see us again soon, please?
Yeah, I'd
Because
enjoy
talking
it.
to you
Yeah,
is absolutely wonderful.
You're
So
amazing.
inspirational.
Thank you,
Thank
Jamie.
you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
More
so much.
information on your scuba diving next time, please.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
we'll have a link to your book on our bio so people can buy it. Buy Jamie's book. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you, darling.
Thank
Good
you,
luck,
Jamie.
Jamie.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, who feels humbled?
Yep.
Well, of course. I mean, how could one not when
Unbelievable.
people have lived through that extraordinary, unimaginable
Yes.
crisis moment in life and choosing and having the brain power to make those extraordinary decisions to save your life.
Yeah.
And then all the things that he's done subsequently. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely
Brilliant, man.
amazing.
Thank you all very much thank you, Hilary, for stepping into the breach. The breach?
Yes,
Is
darling.
that the right word?
Yes, the breach.
Stepping into the breach. And we will see you on Wednesday, where we have two lovely guests, Louise Jameson and Jeffrey Holland, joining us. And Sherry will be back to tell us what she's been up to. So thanks again, Hills. You'll be back soon, as always.
Thank
and
you
we'll
so
see
much.
you on Wednesday.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.